The insurance company denied my claim 3 days before Christmas in a form letter after my family had lost our home and everything in it to a fire. The letter cited a policy exclusion that did not apply, used language designed to sound final and unappealable, and was, I understood immediately, not a mistake. It was a strategy. They were betting that a man who had just lost his house, who was exhausted and grieving and living in a motel with his family, would read that letter and give up. What the adjuster who denied my claim could not have known, because he never bothered to look, was that I had spent 22 years of my career as an insurance claims adjuster myself, and that I knew exactly what they were doing because I used to watch other people do it. My name is Gregory Sloan. I'm 58 years old, and this is the story of how my own insurance company tried to cheat my family out of everything we were owed after the worst night of our lives, and how a man who knew the machine from the inside took them apart with their own policy. Let me start with the fire, because you cannot understand the betrayal without understanding the loss. It was an electrical fire in the middle of the night, in the wall of our home of 19 years. We got out, my wife, Carol, our teenage son, and I, and the dog, all of us, which is the only thing that truly matters and the thing I remind myself of on the bad days. But we stood in the street in our pajamas in the cold and watched 19 years of our life burn. The house was a near total loss. The things you cannot replace, the photographs, my father's tools, the height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe as our son grew. All of it, gone in a few hours. I remember the specific, useless details, the way you do from a night like that. I remember my son, 16 years old and trying so hard to be a man about it, standing very straight beside me with the dog's leash gripped in both hands, and then his face just crumpling when a section of the roof fell in. I remember Carol saying, over and over, very quietly, "We got out. We're all out. That's what matters, less to me than to herself," like a prayer she was using to hold herself together. I remember the firefighter who put a blanket around my shoulders and told me, kindly, that we'd done everything right by getting out fast. And I remember thinking, with the strange clarity that shock gives you, it's all right. We're insured. 19 years of premiums. Whatever else is gone, the one thing we don't have to worry about is the money. The house can be rebuilt. That is what insurance is for. I actually felt, standing in that freezing street, a small flicker of gratitude that we had been responsible people, that we had paid faithfully, that the system would now do for us the one thing it existed to do. That flicker of gratitude is the most painful part of the memory now, because I did not yet know what was coming. It is a particular kind of grief, watching your home burn, and anyone who has been through it knows that for weeks afterward you are not entirely in your right mind. You are in shock. You are running on adrenaline and loss. And that, I would come to understand, is precisely the state the insurance company was counting on. Because here is what I knew that they didn't know I knew. I had spent 22 years as a claims adjuster. 2 decades inside the insurance industry, handling claims, learning exactly how the machine works, and, in my last years there, growing increasingly uncomfortable with what I was being asked to do, which is part of why I eventually left. I knew the business from the inside. I knew the policies. I knew the regulations. And, most importantly, I knew the playbook, the specific, deliberate set of tactics that a certain kind of insurer uses not to evaluate a claim honestly, but to wear a claimant down until they accept far less than they are owed, or give up entirely. I had watched it done. To my quiet shame, in my early years, before I understood what I was part of, I had probably done versions of it myself. And now, in the cruelest possible irony, the machine I had once been a cog in had turned its full attention on my own family. We were insured with a company I'll call Summit Mutual. We had paid our premiums faithfully for 19 years. 19 years, never a late payment, never a single claim. We were, on paper, the perfect customers, the kind who pay and never ask for anything. And the moment we finally needed the thing we had been paying for all those years, Summit Mutual did not treat us as the loyal customers we were. They treated us as a cost to be minimized. The tactics began almost immediately, and I recognized every single one, because I had a name for each of them from my years on the inside. First came the delay. After the fire, when we filed our claim, the process simply slowed. Our calls were not returned promptly. Documents we submitted were not received and had to be sent again. The adjuster assigned to us, a man named Brad Keller, was perpetually unavailable, perpetually needing just one more thing before the claim could proceed. To a normal claimant, this looks like bureaucratic incompetence. I knew it for what it actually was, a deliberate tactic. Delay is a weapon. When a family has lost their home and is paying out of pocket for a motel and replacement necessities while waiting for the insurance money they are owed, every week of delay increases the financial pressure on them and increases the likelihood that they will accept a lowball settlement just to make the bleeding stop. The delay is not a failure of the process. The delay is the process. Then came the lowball. After weeks of delay, Summit Mutual made us an initial offer on our contents and structure that was a small fraction of what our policy actually provided for, a fraction of the cost to rebuild and replace. To a grieving, exhausted family desperate for any money at all, even a lowball offer glitters. They were betting we'd grab it. I knew that the offer was an opening insult, a deliberate anchor set far below the real value, calibrated to exploit our desperation. And our desperation was real. I want to be honest about that, because it is the engine the whole scheme runs on. We were a family of 3 plus a dog living in 2 cramped motel rooms. We were paying for that motel out of our own pocket, along with new clothes, toiletries, a rental car after the fire damaged ours, my son's replaced school things, the endless, grinding expenses of having lost literally everything you own, all of it landing on us at once while the money we were owed sat behind Summit Mutual's wall of delay. Carol had gone quiet in a way that frightened me. My son was doing his homework on a motel bed. Every week that passed, the financial pressure tightened another notch, and I understood, both as a husband watching his family suffer and as a former adjuster who had watched this exact pressure applied to others, that the lowball offer was timed precisely for the moment that pressure became unbearable. They wanted us to break. A family in our position, without my particular knowledge, would have taken that offer and signed away the rest of what they were owed, simply to stop the bleeding. That is not a failure of judgment by those families. It is the intended result of a deliberate design. And then, when I did not grab the lowball offer, when I instead began, calmly, asking specific and informed questions about how they had calculated it, came the denial. The form letter, 3 days before Christmas. The timing, again, was not an accident. I knew from the inside that denials and bad news are very often timed to land during holidays and weekends, when claimants are distracted, emotional, and least likely to mount an immediate, organized response. The letter cited a policy exclusion, some technical clause about the cause or maintenance of the electrical system, that they claimed voided our coverage. And it was written in that flat, bureaucratic, final-sounding language that is engineered to make a normal person feel that the door has been permanently closed, and there is no point in pushing on it. For a normal family, that letter would have been the end. And that is exactly the tragedy of how these tactics work. They succeed, overwhelmingly, against honest people who do not know the machine. Most people, faced with that denial, would have wept and raged and ultimately given up because they would have had no idea that the denial was not a verdict, but an opening move. They would not have known that the exclusion cited didn't actually apply. They would not have known their rights. And Summit Mutual was counting on exactly that ignorance, the same way they always did. But they had denied the wrong claim. They had, out of all the exhausted families they processed that year, sent their bad faith denial to a 22-year veteran of their own industry. I want to tell you about the night I read that denial letter because it was the turning point. I was sitting in a cramped motel room, my family asleep, everything we owned reduced to a few suitcases of donated and hastily bought clothes. And I read the letter, and my first reaction, I will admit, was the despair they intended. For about an hour, I felt exactly as small and beaten as that letter was designed to make me feel. And then something else rose up underneath the despair, something cold and clear and professional. Because I read the letter again, this time not as a victim, but as an adjuster. And as an adjuster, I could see that the letter was garbage. The exclusion they cited did not apply to our situation. I knew the case law and the regulations well enough to know they were reaching badly. The denial was not legally sound. It was a bluff that worked on people who couldn't read the cards. And I could read the cards. I had dealt them. So I stopped grieving the claim, and I started building the case. The way I used to build them, except this time I was on the other side of the table, and this time it was personal. The first thing I did was the thing my 22 years had trained into my bones. I created a complete, meticulous record of everything. I want anyone fighting an insurance company to hear this part, because it is the whole game. I started a claim diary. Every phone call, the date, the time, the name of the person I spoke to, and a summary of exactly what was said. Every document, when it was sent, how it was sent, and proof of delivery. Every deadline the policy and the regulations imposed on the insurer, and there are many, because insurers are legally required to respond and act within specific time frames. I tracked so that I could document every single one they violated. I had, in fact, been doing this from the very first day after the fire, out of pure professional habit. Here is the thing about that diary that the insurance company never understood. To Brad Keller, every interaction was a small victory in a war of attrition. Another week stalled, another document lost, another reason the claim couldn't proceed, each one designed to wear me down a little more. He thought he was grinding me into the ground. What he was actually doing, with every stall, was making an entry in my evidence log. March 4th, 2:15 p.m., spoke to B. Keller, stated my contents inventory was not received, though I have the certified mail receipt showing delivery March 1st. March 18th, claim now 31 days old, statutory deadline for acknowledgement exceeded by 16 days. Every tactic that was supposed to defeat me became, in my hands, a dated, sourced, undeniable piece of a bad faith case. He was building my file for me and didn't know it, because he had no idea he was talking to someone who knew that the diary was the weapon. Where Summit Mutual saw a grieving man they could stall, there was actually a former adjuster quietly logging every stall as evidence of bad faith. Then I went back to the policy itself, and I read all of it. Every page, every endorsement, every definition, every exclusion. This is the document that 99% of policyholders never read, the document the insurer is counting on you never reading. I read it the way I'd read 1,000 policies professionally, and I confirmed what I'd suspected, that our loss was covered, clearly, and that the exclusion Summit Mutual had cited to deny us simply did not apply to the facts of our fire. Let me be specific about that, because it is the crux of the whole thing. The exclusion they cited was the sort of clause that lets an insurer deny a claim when a fire is caused by the homeowner's own long-term failure to maintain a known hazard, a documented, neglected defect they were warned about and ignored. That is a real and reasonable exclusion. Insurers shouldn't have to pay for damage a homeowner caused through proven neglect. But it had nothing to do with us. Our fire was a sudden electrical failure inside a wall, in a home that had passed every inspection, with no prior warning, no documented defect, no neglect of any kind. The fire investigator's own report said as much. Summit Mutual had reached for an exclusion that requires evidence of homeowner neglect and applied it to a claim where no such evidence existed, where the evidence, in fact, pointed the opposite way. They hadn't denied us because the exclusion fit. They denied us because they were betting we'd never check whether it fit. In my industry, that has a name. It's called bad faith. And bad faith is the one thing an insurance company is genuinely afraid of, because a documented pattern of bad faith claim handling exposes them to liability far, far beyond the value of the original claim, to penalties, to regulatory sanction, and in many places to damages that dwarf the amount they were trying to avoid paying. That was the trap they had walked into without knowing it. By trying to cheat me out of my legitimate claim with bad faith tactics, Summit Mutual had exposed themselves to something much worse than simply paying my claim. They had handed me, a man who knew exactly how to recognize and document it, a textbook bad faith case. Every delay I had logged, every misrepresentation, every blown statutory deadline, every element of the bogus denial, all of it, documented, was now evidence not just that they owed me my claim, but that they had handled it in bad faith. I even pulled my 19 years of payment history and the fire investigator's report and set them alongside the denial. So the contrast was undeniable. 19 years of a perfect customer, an accidental covered fire, and an insurer reaching for a neglect exclusion that the evidence flatly contradicted. It was, I thought, looking at it spread across the motel room bed, the cleanest bad faith file I had ever seen. And I had seen many. I did not tip my hand. This is the part my experience taught me that most people get wrong. The instinct, when you realize you've been wronged, is to call the adjuster and unload, to tell them you know what they're doing, to threaten, to rage. That is exactly what you must not do, because it tells the other side what you know and lets them start cleaning up their file. So I stayed calm. I continued, in my communications with Brad Keller, to behave like a confused, overwhelmed, ordinary claimant, the very thing he'd assumed I was. I asked my questions in writing, politely, in ways that quietly forced him to put his bad faith reasoning in writing too, building my evidence with every exchange while he thought he was managing a beaten man. He kept creating the case against his own company, one condescending letter at a time, exactly as I had once watched claims get mishandled from the inside. When my file was complete, when I had the policy proving coverage, the bogus exclusion disproved, the diary of every delay and violation, and Summit Mutual's own written statements building my bad faith case. I made my move. I did not call Brad Keller. I retained a lawyer who specialized in insurance bad faith litigation, and I walked into her office and set my file on her desk. She started reading, and I watched her expression change from the cautious sympathy lawyers offer a new client into something much sharper and more delighted. She looked up at me and said, "Mr. Sloan, do you do this for a living?" And I told her that I used to, and that this was the most satisfying file I had ever assembled. She said, "I have to be honest with you. Most clients bring me a shoebox of receipts and a story. You've brought me a closed bad faith case with a bow on it. They are going to deeply regret denying you." She was right. Here is what happened after. When my lawyer sent Summit Mutual a demand letter laying out the case, the clear coverage, the inapplicable exclusion, the meticulously documented pattern of delay and bad faith handling, the violated statutory deadlines, and the explicit threat of a bad faith lawsuit with the damages that brings, the response was not the stonewalling I'd received as a loan claimant. It was panic, because Summit Mutual's own lawyers understood instantly what their adjuster had not, that they were no longer looking at a claim they could minimize, but at a bad faith case that could cost them many times the claim's value, plus penalties, plus the kind of regulatory attention no insurer wants. The machine that runs on grinding down the uninformed does not function at all against someone who knows exactly how it works and has documented every move. They paid. They paid the full value of our claim, the complete cost to rebuild our home and replace our contents, the figure that had been right there in the policy all along, somewhere over $400,000. And because I had documented their bad faith so thoroughly, the settlement included a great deal more than the claim itself, compensation for the way they had handled it, an amount substantial enough that, I have no doubt, Brad Keller's denial of the Sloan claim became a cautionary tale in his office. I think often about the difference between the two letters. The denial they sent me, 3 days before Christmas, was 3 short paragraphs of final-sounding language designed to make me disappear. The settlement they eventually signed was the product of my lawyer's demand and their own lawyer's dawning horror, and it was many times larger than the lowball, larger even than the straight claim value, because the moment the case stopped being a grieving family, we can stall, and became a documented bad faith exposure, every incentive reversed. The same company that had nickel-and-dimed a homeless family for weeks suddenly could not write the check fast enough, because now the delay was costing them instead of us. That is the whole secret of these machines, laid bare. They are not evil so much as ruthlessly responsive to incentive, and the instant you make bad faith more expensive than fair dealing, they deal fairly. Knowledge doesn't appeal to their conscience. It changes their math. And I made sure of one more thing. That a complete record of Summit Mutual's bad faith handling was filed with the State Department of Insurance, the regulator with the power to investigate and sanction insurers who systematically mistreat claimants, because I knew, with certainty, that my family was not the only one Summit Mutual had run this playbook on. We were simply the only one that year who had run the playbook from the other side. The settlement made my family whole. The regulatory complaint was for everyone else's family, the ones who got the same Christmas letter and didn't happen to have spent 22 years learning how to read it. We rebuilt our house. It stands again, on the same lot, and Carol planted a garden where the old one had been, and one evening last summer we sat on the new porch and I realized, for the first time in a long time, that the grief had finally loosened its grip. The height marks on the doorframe are gone forever, some things insurance money cannot restore. But the home is real again, and my family is whole, and the company that tried to use our worst night to cheat us paid, in the end, for every bit of it, and then some. And I did one more thing, the thing that matters most to me now. I spend a good part of my retirement helping people fight wrongful insurance denials. Not for money. I do it for free, because I spent 22 years on the wrong side of that machine, and I have a debt to work off. I sit with families who have received that flat, final-sounding denial letter and feel exactly as beaten as I once felt in that motel room. And I tell them the truth that the industry counts on them never learning. That a denial is not a verdict. It is an opening move. That the exclusion they cited may not apply. That you have rights, and the insurer has deadlines, and the policy is a contract they are legally bound to honor. And that the single most powerful thing you can do, more powerful than rage, more powerful than despair, is to calmly, methodically, document everything and refuse to be ground down. I want to leave you with the thing 22 years on the inside taught me, the thing I wish every policyholder understood. An insurance bad faith operation runs on a single bet that the person across the table doesn't know the rules of the game and is too overwhelmed by their own loss to learn them in time. The whole machine, the delay, the lowball, the holiday denial, the bogus exclusion, the final sounding language, is engineered to exploit ignorance and exhaustion. It is devastatingly effective against honest people in the worst moment of their lives, which is precisely the moment it is designed to strike. But it has no defense at all against knowledge. The instant the person across the table knows the policy, knows the regulations, and documents every move, the entire apparatus inverts, and every tactic they deploy becomes another piece of evidence against them. They are powerful only against the uninformed. I was not uninformed. I had helped build the machine, and so when they pointed it at my family, I knew exactly which thread to pull. My name is Gregory Sloan. They denied my claim 3 days before Christmas, certain I was just another beaten family who would give up. They forgot to ask what I did for 22 years. I knew their playbook by heart, because I used to run it, and I used every page of it to make sure they paid my family every dollar they were owed, and learned, the hard way, never to deny the wrong claim. If this story meant something to you, stay a while. There are more like it here, stories about the faceless machines that grind down ordinary people, and the calm, patient, perfectly documented moment someone who knows the machine from the inside turns it off. No shouting, no drama, just a policy read cover to cover, a diary of every broken promise, and the quiet justice of being paid exactly what you were owed. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.